You know that feeling? That quiet, gnawing sense that something is wrong, even when everything looks fine? It's like standing on a frozen lake, hearing the I. You know that feeling. That quiet, gnawing sense that something is wrong, even when everything looks fine? It's like standing on a frozen lake, hearing the ice crack under your feet. You tell yourself it's nothing until the ground gives way. For me, that feeling didn't hit all at once. It started as a whisper in the back of my mind, a faint unease that grew louder with each passing day. The last 3 years had been a nightmare. My company teetered on the edge of collapse, and as one of the key managers, I lived at the office. Long days, sleepless nights, endless fires to put out. In the chaos, I lost sight of everything that mattered. My wife, my daughter, Emily, and myself. Emily had always been the bright spot in our lives. She was smart, driven, and full of ideas about how she'd change the world. When she got accepted into a top-tier college, we were beyond proud. But her leaving for school left our home eerily quiet. Without her energy filling the rooms, it was just me and my wife, Anna. And I was too distracted to notice how different things had become between us. After Emily left, we made a big decision. Sell the house and move closer to the coast, where my new office would be located. Anna had always dreamed of living near the ocean, and after everything we'd been through, I thought maybe the change would be good for us, something fresh. But instead of excitement, there was a strange tension in the air as we put the house on the market. The day everything changed started like any other. We'd scheduled an open house and a few families came by to look around. Most of them were friendly, asking questions about the neighborhood and the schools nearby. I stood in the background, sipping coffee and answering when needed. Anna was the real star. She knew how to make people feel at home. She walked through each room with them, painting a picture of the memories we'd built there, making them feel like this house could be theirs. Then the last couple of the day showed up. I remember the moment they stepped through the door because everything shifted. They looked to be in their mid-40s, well-dressed but understated. The man had salt and pepper hair and a serious expression, while the woman had a quiet, tense energy about her. When Anna came down the stairs to greet them, they both froze. I don't know how else to describe it except to say that the air felt heavier. The woman's eyes locked onto Anna, and something in her expression changed. Recognition, anger, maybe even disgust. She grabbed the man's arm and muttered something, and he gave Anna a hard, unreadable look before turning around and walking out the front door. No questions about the house, no polite goodbyes. They just left. I turned to Anna, expecting her to laugh it off or make a joke. But she didn't. She was pale, her usual warm smile nowhere to be found. "What was that about?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She forced a weak smile and shook her head. "I have no idea. Maybe they changed their mind." But she wasn't a good liar, not when it came to me. I knew her too well. Her voice had that tight, forced tone people use when they're hiding something. The moment passed, but it clung to me like smoke. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Anna slept beside me. The same questions looped in my mind. Who were those people? Why did they react like that? And more importantly, why did Anna look so shaken? The next morning, I couldn't let it go. I drove to the real estate office under the pretense of checking the schedule for future showings. When I walked in, I saw them, the couple from the day before. They were sitting in the waiting area, quietly talking to the agent. I should have left it alone, but instead, I walked straight over to them. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my tone polite. "I was wondering if I could speak with you for a moment." The man's jaw tightened, but the woman gave him a nod. She turned to me with a tired but resigned expression. "All right," she said. "Let's talk." We stepped into the hallway, away from the other agents. I introduced myself, and they told me their names, Mark and Helen. Helen's face was unreadable, but I could see the pain in her eyes. "I'm sorry if this seems strange," I began, "but I couldn't help noticing the way you reacted yesterday. It felt personal." Helen gave a bitter laugh. "That's because it was." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt a strange sense of vertigo, as though the floor had tilted under my feet. "What do you mean?" I asked, my throat dry. She exchanged a glance with Mark, who nodded stiffly. Then she turned back to me, her eyes brimming with something between anger and sorrow. "Your wife," she said slowly, each word cutting deep. "She's the reason my son's marriage fell apart." For a second, I thought I misheard her. The words didn't make sense. Anna, my Anna, the devoted wife and mother who stood by me through everything? I could barely breathe as she continued. "He was married, a good man, trying to build a life with his wife. And then she came along. She destroyed them." I opened my mouth to argue, to tell her she was mistaken, but nothing came out. Instead, my mind reeled back to those moments I'd dismissed. The new clothes, the sudden interest. In late work events, the spark in her eyes that hadn't been there in years. I'd assumed she was finding ways to cope with our stressful life, ways to stay sane, but maybe there was more to it. Mark, who'd been silent until now, stepped in. "We didn't come here to cause trouble," he said quietly. "We just didn't expect to see her." They turned to leave, but Helen paused and looked back at me. "You deserve to know the truth." Then they were gone, leaving me standing there with my world splintering around me. I drove home in a fog, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The world outside the car felt distant, like I was watching someone else's. Life unraveled from behind a screen. The same sentence echoed in my head over and over. She's the reason my son's marriage fell apart. I pulled into the driveway and sat there, staring blankly at the house that had once felt like home. The windows were glowing with the warm light of the kitchen. I could see Anna moving around inside, preparing dinner like everything was normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. I forced myself out of the car and walked inside. The smell of garlic and roasted vegetables hit me, but instead of comfort, it made me nauseous. Anna was at the stove, humming softly to herself. She turned when she heard me come in, her face lighting up like always. "Hey, you're back early," she said with a smile. That smile. For years it had been my anchor through every storm, and now all I could think was how many lies had been hidden behind it. "I ran into that couple from yesterday," I said, cutting straight to the point. I couldn't keep it in. My voice came out rougher than I intended. "At the real estate office." Anna's smile faltered. I saw her hand tighten around the spatula. "Oh," she said softly. "What did they say?" I took a slow step forward, watching her closely. "They said you ruined their son's marriage." The color drained from her face. She looked away, focusing on the pan like if she just kept cooking, none of this would be real. "Is it true?" My voice cracked at the end. I hated how desperate I sounded, but I needed her to tell me it was a mistake, that Helen had been lying, that it was all some insane misunderstanding. Anna put the spatula down and slowly turned to face me. Her eyes were glossy with tears, and she bit her bottom lip, the same way she always did when she was about to say something hard. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," she whispered. Her words hit me like a freight train. There was no misunderstanding, no lie to unravel. It was true. My knees felt weak, and I had to grip the counter to steady myself. "Jesus Christ, Anna," I muttered. "How could you do this?" Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I felt no sympathy. Not now. She reached for me, but I pulled back, her touch burning like fire. "It wasn't what you think," she said, her voice trembling. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was lonely." "Lonely?" I let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through my hair. "So your answer was to... what? Destroy someone else's life?" My throat tightened, my voice almost breaking. "Destroy us?" Anna sobbed, pressing her hands to her face. "I made a mistake," she choked out. "It wasn't some long affair, it just happened." I hated her choice of words. Just happened. Like she'd tripped and fallen into someone else's bed. "Who was he?" I demanded. "The couple said it was their son." "Who was he?" Anna wiped her face with her sleeve and stared down at the floor, silent. I took a step closer, my anger flaring. "Who was he, Anna?" She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. His name was Daniel. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. He was one of the newer hires at the company. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. You slept with someone from work? She nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the floor, unable to meet my eyes. It only happened once. I barked out a harsh laugh. Once? You think that makes it better? Anna's face crumpled, and she reached for me again. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I was lonely, and you were gone. Always gone. I felt invisible. Daniel was kind to me, and I was weak. Her words stung even more than the truth itself. Because part of me understood it. The long nights, the empty house, the way I'd shut her out without meaning to. But understanding didn't make it hurt any less. You should have talked to me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You should have told me you felt that way instead of throwing away everything we had. Anna shook her head. I know I should have. I was stupid. But after it happened, I ended it. I cut him off. I've spent every day since trying to make it right, trying to be a good wife to you. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to shout, to break something. I thought about Helen's face, the raw pain in her eyes when she talked about her son's marriage. Daniel had probably loved his wife, too. I met his parents, I said bitterly. Did you know that? They came to see the house. They saw you and knew exactly who you were. Anna gasped, her eyes wide with horror. Oh, my God. Yeah, I continued, my voice shaking. Imagine how that felt for them. You didn't just ruin us, Anna. You ruined them, too. Anna crumbled onto a kitchen chair, her body shaking, with sobs. I watched her, feeling cold and detached, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. For a long moment, there was silence between us, broken only by her quiet crying. I don't know if I can forgive you, I finally said, my voice hollow. The words felt like knives in my throat. I loved you more than anything, and now I don't even know who you are. Anna looked up at me, her face pale and tear-streaked. Please, she whispered. Please don't leave. I can't lose you. I shook my head, stepping back toward the door. I needed air, space, anything to get away from the suffocating weight of this conversation. I can't do this right now. Without waiting for her response, I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, leaving Anna sobbing in the kitchen. As the door clicked shut behind me, I felt like I'd slammed it on the life we'd built together. I got in my car and drove aimlessly, barely seeing the road in front of me. My mind was spinning with every memory, every moment I thought I'd known my wife. The woman I'd loved, the mother of my child, the person I'd trusted with my life. She was a stranger to me now. I don't know how long I drove. Time felt irrelevant, just mile after mile of blurred streetlights and the sound of the tires humming beneath me. At some point, I pulled into an empty parking lot near the beach. The ocean stretched out in front of me, dark and endless. I rolled down the window, letting the cold, salt air hit my face, hoping it would clear my head. But nothing could touch the storm brewing inside me. Daniel. His name felt like a poison spreading through my veins. I pictured him, a younger man, confident, charming, probably everything I hadn't been in a long time. Was he handsome? Did she compare us? I shook my head, trying to chase the thoughts away, but they kept creeping back. Every moment I'd spent working late, every missed dinner, every time I saw her laugh at her phone and assumed it was some silly meme, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized I was solving until now. I reached for my phone before I could stop myself. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through my messages. There it was, Anna's contact, with a photo of her smiling on a trip we'd taken years ago. She looked so happy in that picture, and for the first time, I wondered if it had all been a lie. I wanted answers, but more than that, I wanted to hurt her the way she'd hurt me. I called her. She picked up after 2 rings. Hello? Her voice was small and fragile. I stayed silent for a moment, listening to her breathing on the other end. I wanted to scream at her, to unload every ounce of rage in my body, but all I could manage was, why? She didn't ask me to clarify. She knew exactly what I meant. "I told you," she whispered. "I was lonely." "That's not an answer," I said, my voice raw. "That's an excuse." There was a pause, then a shaky sigh. "I don't know what you want me to say. I've been trying to figure it out myself for the past year." A year. I clutched the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. She'd been carrying this secret for an entire year. Living in the same house, sleeping next to me, smiling through family dinners like everything was fine. "How did it even start?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. She hesitated. "It was after that conference you missed. Remember? The one in the city? Everyone from the office went." I did remember. I'd canceled last minute, because a deal at work was falling apart. I told her to go without me and have fun. God, how naive had I been. "We were at a bar after the meetings," she continued, her voice distant, like she was reliving it. "I was sitting alone, feeling invisible. And he sat down next to me. We talked for hours. I don't even remember what about, but for the first time in so long, I felt seen." I wanted to interrupt, to tell her how absurd it all sounded, but I didn't. I just listened, letting the knife twist deeper. "I should have walked away," she said, her voice cracking. But I didn't. We kissed that night, and after that, things just spiraled. A wave of discomfort churned within me. "Did you love him?" "No," she said quickly. "It wasn't like that. He was just easy. There wasn't history between us. No baggage, no fights. But it wasn't real. I swear to you, it wasn't real." I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. "But we're real," I muttered. "Or at least I thought we were." "We are," she whispered. "We still are." Her words hung between us, fragile and desperate. But all I could feel was emptiness. "I met his parents," I said, breaking the silence. "Did you know he's divorced now? His marriage is over because of you." Anna let out a small, broken sob. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," I snapped. "You didn't care about the fallout, did you? You just wanted to feel good about yourself." "That's not fair," she said, her voice rising. "You have no idea what it's like to live in your shadow, to be the one holding everything together while you are always somewhere else, saving the company, fixing everything, but us." I gritted my teeth, anger boiling over. "So it's my fault?" "No," she shouted. "It's not about blame. I'm not trying to justify what I did. I'm just trying to make you understand how I got here." I laughed bitterly. "Congratulations, Anna. I understand. You were lonely, so you destroyed us. Mission accomplished." There was silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, soft and ragged. "Do you even know how much I loved you?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I put you and Emily above everything, and you just threw it all away." Anna's sobs deepened. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. "Even when I was at my worst, I loved you." "Then why didn't you choose me?" I asked. My voice was soft now, hollow. "Why didn't you fight for us instead of running to him?" She didn't have an answer. Or maybe she did, but I didn't want to hear it. I couldn't take it anymore. I hung up, tossing the phone onto the passenger seat like it had burned me. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat there, staring, out at the black waves crashing against the shore. The truth of it all finally sank in. I couldn't undo this. I couldn't go back to the man I was before I knew. I'd been betrayed in the worst way possible, by the person I trusted most in the world. I sat in that parking lot until the cold seeped into my bones. Eventually, I started the car and drove home, numb and exhausted. When I walked through the door, Anna was waiting for me in the living room, eyes swollen from crying. She didn't say anything, and neither did I. I just walked past her and went upstairs. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of Anna's soft crying in the other room. I'd always thought the worst pain in life was losing someone you loved, but I was wrong. The worst pain was realizing they'd already been lost, and you hadn't even noticed. The morning light crept into the room slowly, turning the ceiling from shadows to pale gray. I hadn't slept, not even for a minute. I just lay there, my body heavy with exhaustion, my mind too loud to let me rest. Anna didn't come to bed. I heard her pacing downstairs through the night, crying softly at times, then falling silent. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel anything at all. When I finally got up, the house felt strange, cold, unfamiliar, like someone else's. Home. I went downstairs to make coffee, moving on autopilot. Anna was sitting at the kitchen table, wrapped in one of her old sweaters. Her eyes were red and swollen, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked small, fragile. She didn't say anything as I filled the coffee pot and started the brew. The only sound was the faint hiss of the machine and the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, she broke the silence. "I didn't sleep," she said softly, like she was confessing a crime. "Me neither." I didn't look at her. I couldn't. She exhaled shakily, trying to hold herself together. "We need to talk. I think we've talked enough." "No," she insisted, her voice wavering. "We haven't. Not really." I turned around slowly, crossing my arms over my chest. "All right, talk." Anna's lip quivered as she searched for the right words. "I've been thinking all night about what I did, about how I broke us, and I don't blame you for hating me." I flinched at the word hate. I didn't know if I hated her, but I definitely didn't love her the same way anymore. "I don't want to make excuses," she continued, her hands trembling in her lap. "But I need you to understand. I didn't fall out of love with you. I fell out of love with myself. I felt invisible, useless, and instead of fixing myself, I clung to the first thing that made me feel alive." She wiped her cheek with the sleeve of her sweater. "It was selfish and cruel, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." Her words hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. Part of me wanted to believe her, to take that pain she carried and make it lighter. But another part of me, the one that had been gutted by betrayal, wasn't ready to let her off the hook. "I gave you everything," I said quietly. "My time, my trust, my loyalty. And when things got hard, you didn't fight for us. You betrayed us." Anna nodded, tears sliding down her face. "I know." My hands were shaking as I poured myself a cup of coffee. The warmth of the mug didn't do anything to steady me. "I thought we had a life worth fighting for," I muttered. "But I guess you didn't see it that way." "That's not true," she whispered. "I did. I do. You're everything to me." I set the cup down with a harsh clink. "No, Anna. I wasn't. If I was, we wouldn't be here." She let out a small, broken sob. "Please, don't say that." I felt my anger surge again. "You don't get to cry like you're the victim here. You made this mess, Anna. You destroyed us. And for what? A stupid, fleeting moment that meant nothing?" She flinched like I'd slapped her, but I didn't care. She needed to hear it. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "Yeah, well, you did." I rubbed my temples, trying to calm the pounding in my head. "Do you even know how much damage you've caused? I met his parents, Anna. His mother told me you destroyed their son's life. He's divorced now. His wife is gone. Just like we're about to be." Anna's eyes widened in panic. "No." She stood up, gripping the back of the chair. "Please don't say that." I stared at her, my voice cold and even. "What do you think is going to happen? You think we're going to go back to the way things were? That I'm going to wake up one day and forget what you did?" She shook her head frantically. "No, but I thought maybe we could work through it. Couples survive this. People rebuild. I love you, and I know you still love me." Her words felt like salt in a wound. Love. That word had lost all its meaning. "I don't know if I do," I admitted, the truth scraping its way out of my throat. "Because the person I loved wouldn't have done this to me." Anna's legs buckled, and she sank back into the chair, sobbing uncontrollably. I watched her for a moment, feeling nothing but emptiness. Then I turned away and grabbed my jacket from the hook near the door. "Where are you going?" she asked between sobs. "Out." "For how long?" I shrugged. "I don't know." Her voice broke. "Please don't leave me." I paused at the door, my hand resting on the knob. "I'm not the one who left." "Anna, you did." With that, I stepped outside into the cold morning air and shut the door behind me. I drove aimlessly for hours, passing familiar streets and landmarks that once held memories. Our first dinner date at the corner restaurant, the park where we'd taken Emily to play when she was little, the coffee shop where Anna and I used to sit for hours, talking about everything and nothing. All of it felt tainted now. At some point, I ended up at my best friend Jake's house. He was one of the few people I trusted. I pulled into his driveway and sat there for a few minutes before finally knocking on his door. Jake opened it, looking surprised to see me so early. "Dude, you look like hell," he said, stepping aside to let me in. I gave a weak laugh. "Yeah, well, I feel like it too." He led me to the kitchen and handed me a beer without asking any questions. Jake wasn't the type to pry. He waited until you were ready to talk. After a long silence, I finally spoke. "Anna cheated on me." The words felt foreign coming out of my mouth, like they belonged to someone else's story. Jake froze for a second, the beer halfway to his mouth. "What?" I nodded, staring at the table. "With some guy from work. A younger guy." Jesus Christ. He set the beer down and ran a hand through his hair. I don't even know what to say. "Me neither." I laughed bitterly. It's like, 1 minute, I'm living this life I thought was solid, and the next, everything's gone. Jake leaned forward, his expression serious. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." I swallowed hard. I want to hate her, Jake. I really do. But part of me still, I don't know. Part of me is scared of what life looks like without her. Jake nodded slowly. "That's normal. You've been together forever. But man, you've got to figure out what you can live with and what you can't." I stared down at the beer bottle, tracing the label with my thumb. "I just don't know if I can ever look at her and not see what she did. I don't know if I can live with that." Jake's voice softened. "Then maybe it's time to let go." The words hit me harder than I expected. Let go. The idea of it terrified me. But maybe he was right. Maybe holding on was just prolonging the inevitable. The thought of walking away from everything we'd built together felt like cutting off a limb. But so did staying. When I got home that evening, the house was dark except for the faint glow of a lamp in the living room. Anna was sitting on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest, staring blankly at the wall. She looked like a ghost of the woman I once knew. Part of me wanted to walk over, sit beside her, and tell her everything would be okay. But I couldn't, because it wouldn't be. She looked up as I walked in, her eyes searching mine for some kind of sign that things could still be salvaged. I didn't say anything as I set my keys down and took off my jacket. The silence between us was heavy, like a fog that settled over everything. "Did you eat?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No. I made pasta earlier. If you're hungry," I shook my head. "I'm not." She nodded and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she'd had since we were younger. I sat down in the armchair across from her, trying to find the right words, but everything felt inadequate. Finally, she spoke again. "Did you think about what you want to do?" I let out a slow breath. "Yeah, I did." She sat up a little straighter, like she was bracing herself. "I don't think I can stay," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I've been trying to imagine a future where we're okay, where I trust you again. But I can't see it." Anna's face crumpled and tears spilled down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered. "Don't say that. Don't give up on us." "I'm not the one who gave up," I said bitterly. Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't move to comfort her. I felt cruel, but I also felt justified. She had made her choice long before I made mine. "You've had a year to come to terms with what you did," I continued. "I've only had a few days, and I feel like I'm suffocating in this house, Anna. Everywhere I look, I see the life I thought we had, and it's all a lie." Anna wiped her face furiously, like she was trying to hold herself together by sheer will. "I don't care how long it takes," she said. "I'll do whatever it takes to earn your forgiveness. I'll go to therapy. We can go together. I'll quit my job if that's what you need. Please just don't leave." Her desperation was like a knife to my heart. But deep down, I knew this wasn't something she could fix. The cracks in our marriage were too deep, and no amount of promises or therapy could change the fact that she'd broken something sacred. "I don't hate you," I said, my voice softening. "But I can't live with this." She shook her head frantically, as if denying it could change the outcome. "We're more than this mistake. We have a family, a history. Emily—" "What about Emily?" The mention of our daughter hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been avoiding that part, how this would affect her, how she'd see us after everything fell apart. "Emily deserves the truth," I said quietly. "She deserves to know why this happened. I'm not going to lie to her." Anna sobbed harder, covering her face with her hands. "She'll hate me." "She'll be hurt," I agreed. "But she'll understand eventually. She deserves honesty, not some fake version of our lives." Anna lowered her hands, her face streaked with tears. "I love you," she whispered. "I've loved you since the moment we met, and I can't imagine my life without you." I felt my own tears welling up, but I fought them back. "I loved you too. But love isn't enough when there's no trust." The room fell silent again. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. It felt like time had stopped, like the house itself was mourning with us. Finally, Anna nodded, defeated. "So, this is it?" I swallowed hard and stood up. "I need space. I'm going to stay at Jake's for a while. I'll come back to figure out the logistics. But I can't stay here right now." Her face crumpled again, but she didn't try to stop me. She just nodded, her body shaking with silent sobs. I walked to the front door and paused, looking back one last time. I wanted to remember her like this, raw, human, broken. Not the woman who had betrayed me, but the woman who was finally honest. "Goodbye, Anna." Her eyes met mine, full of pain and regret. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I nodded, then stepped outside into the cold night. The drive to Jake's felt surreal. My hands gripped the steering wheel, but I wasn't sure how I was even functioning. When I pulled into his driveway, the lights in his living room were still on. Jake opened the door as soon as I knocked, taking one look at my face before pulling me into a tight hug. "You did what you had to do," he said simply. I nodded, but the weight in my chest didn't lift. Inside, Jake handed me a blanket and set up the couch for me. "You want to talk?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not tonight." He didn't push me. He just sat with me for a while, the quiet companionship somehow more comforting than any words could have been. When he finally went to bed, I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. My mind drifted to Emily, imagining how I'd break the news to her. She adored her mother. This would crush her. And yet, through the pain, there was something else. Something small, but undeniable. Relief. As much as it hurt to walk away, I realized that staying would have been worse. I would have been living in a constant state of doubt and resentment, always questioning, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Leaving meant I could breathe again, even if it hurt. By the time dawn crept in through the windows, I still hadn't slept. But for the first time in days, I felt like I could see a way forward. It wasn't going to be easy, and it sure as hell wasn't going to be pretty. But it was mine, and I'd figure out how to rebuild, one piece at a time. The next morning, I sat at Jake's kitchen table staring into a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The world outside was starting to wake up, cars passing by, birds chirping, the sound of someone's lawnmower in the distance. All normal things. But nothing felt normal to me. Jake walked in, scratching his head and yawning. "You sleep at all?" I shook my head. "Not really." He grabbed a mug, poured himself some coffee, and leaned against the counter. "So, what's the plan?" I took a deep breath. I don't know. I need to figure things out with Anna, and I need to talk to Emily. Jake nodded, sympathy in his eyes. That's going to be rough. Yeah? I rubbed my hands over my face, exhausted in every way possible. She deserves the truth, though. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Jake sat across from me. You sure you're ready for that? No, I admitted. But I don't really have a choice. Later that afternoon, I called Emily. I thought about waiting until she came home for the weekend, but that felt like cowardice. I wanted her to hear it from me, not through a text or a cryptic phone call where she sensed something was off. She picked up on the third ring. Hey, Dad. Her voice was cheerful, full of life. I almost couldn't bear it. Hey, kiddo, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. You got a minute? Of course. What's up? I took a deep breath. There's something you need to know. Something about your mom and me. The cheeriness in her tone faded. Okay, what's going on? It's complicated, but the short version is that your mom and I are separating. Silence, the kind that stretches on forever. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft and disbelieving. What? Why? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her question pressing down on me. Because your mom made a mistake, a big one, and I don't think I can move past it. Emily's breath hitched. What kind of mistake? I hesitated, unsure of how much detail to give her, but she wasn't a child anymore. She deserved the truth. She had an affair, I said quietly, with someone from work. There was a long pause. I could hear her trying to process it, to fit the pieces together in her mind. Are you serious? She whispered. I wish I wasn't. Emily let out a shaky breath. How long have you known? Just a few days. But it happened a while ago. Your mom kept it from me. Emily didn't say anything for a long time. When she finally spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. I can't believe this. I know, I said. I'm so sorry. Is she there? Emily asked. No. I'm at Jake's. She was quiet again, and I could feel her heartbreak even through the phone. I don't know what to say, she finally muttered. I thought you guys were solid. So did I whispered. Emily sniffled. What happens now? I don't know, I admitted. But we'll figure it out. I just wanted you to hear it from me. Thanks, she said quietly. I need some time. Take all the time you need, I said. I'm here when you're ready. Okay. I love you, Em. I love you too, Dad. The line went dead, and I sat there staring at my phone, feeling like I'd lost a piece of myself. Over the next few days, the house felt like a graveyard. I went back to gather my things, while Anna stayed at a friend's place. Walking through, each room felt like peeling off a bandage, painful and slow. Every photo on the wall, every piece of furniture, every tiny reminder of the life we'd built together stabbed at me. I packed up my clothes, a few personal things, and some old photo albums. But when I got to the living room shelf, I stopped. There was a framed picture of the three of us, me, Anna, and Emily, on a beach trip from years ago. We were smiling, our arms around each other, sunburned and happy. I picked up the photo and stared at it for what felt like forever. How had we gone from that to this? When had everything started to fall apart? I'd spent so long thinking I was building a life for us, but maybe I'd been building it alone. Maybe I'd been too blind to see the cracks. I left the photo on the shelf. Some things didn't belong in the past. They just hurt too much to carry forward. A week later, I sat across from Anna in a quiet cafe downtown. We'd agreed to meet to discuss the practical things, finances, the house, the steps forward. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept since I left. We made small talk at first, though it was strained. She asked about Emily, and I told her she was still processing everything. Anna's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, accepting it. Then we got down to the hard part, splitting up the life we'd built together. We talked about the house, about selling it and splitting the money. We agreed to keep things as peaceful as possible for Emily's sake. But there was one moment when Anna looked up at me, her voice barely a whisper. "Is there any chance? Any part of you that still thinks we could make this work?" I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in days. I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. The woman who'd stood beside me through every storm, who'd laughed with me, raised our daughter with me, built a life with me. But she wasn't that woman anymore. Or maybe I wasn't the same man. "I don't think so," I said gently. "Too much has happened." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'll never forgive myself for this," she whispered. "You shouldn't," I said. "But you need to figure out how to move forward. We both do." Her sobs were quiet, resigned. I wanted to comfort her, but I knew that wasn't my role anymore. I paid the check and stood up. "Take care of yourself, Anna." She looked up at me, her eyes full of regret. "You too." Months later, I stood on the shore of the beach near my new apartment, watching the waves crash against the sand. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I thought about everything that had happened. How everything I thought I knew had fallen apart in an instant. But I was still standing. The pain was still there, but it didn't consume me the way it had in the beginning. It was quieter now, like an old wound that flares up from time to time but doesn't stop you from moving forward. Emily visited often. She was strong, though I knew it hurt her too. She didn't take sides, and I never asked her to. As for Anna, we spoke sometimes, mostly about Emily. She'd moved back in with her sister and started therapy. I hoped she'd find her way, even if I wasn't part of her story anymore. The truth is, life doesn't tie up neatly. Some stories don't have clean endings or happy resolutions. Some things break and can't be put back together. But I was learning that maybe that's okay. Sometimes survival is the best you can hope for, and sometimes that's enough.